Hello, everyone. We're going to be starting. So if everyone that is here for the US-China press conference, if you could please take a seat. We will be starting in 30 seconds. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and good evening. I'm Joseph Manning, and I serve as the chair of the executive committee of the CR Student Coalition. I'm here with Guan, the director of the China Youth Delegation, Yuan, the international director for China Youth Climate Action Network, and Louise, the director of development for SustainUS. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the members of the press that have joined us here this evening. 2 years ago, leading up to Copenhagen, it was recognized by youth from both the US and China that as the world's two largest economies and emitters of greenhouse gases, our nation shared a joint responsibility to work together to solve climate change. However, one very critical barrier stood in our way: trust. So as youth, we came together over a dinner to share our stories about the work that we do at home and to begin the process of building that trust. I was very lucky to be one of the youth attending that dinner, and for me, it was an eye-opening experience. Going into it, I knew little to nothing about China, about its people or its politics. And admittedly, I would never say that I left the dinner as an expert. However, what I did have was a number of contacts in China that I continue to exchange emails with to this day. And I had a desire to continue to work with youth from China on our shared challenges. That's a desire that I believe many youth from that dinner left that dinner with. And that's why our work managed to continue in Cancun last year. Not only did we have 2 formal workshops, but we agreed to go one step further and to collaborate on a joint action, the race to a clean energy future, aimed at encouraging our respective negotiators to work together, just as we had been doing. Now we're here in Durban, and we realize that if we want to see progress on climate change, our collaboration cannot simply occur once a year for 2 weeks in December. That's why I'm very excited to announce that the Sierra Student Coalition will be joining together with the China Youth Climate Action Network and SustainUS to form the US-China Youth Coalition for Sustainable Development. I will turn this discussion over to my friends to share more about the future of our collaboration. Guan?
Thank you, everyone. I'm Guan Guan from China Youth Climate Action Network. And yesterday we had our Chinese-US youth workshop on long-term cooperation. And this is the 3rd year since we first started our series of workshops on climate change and sustainable development between Chinese youth and US youth. What makes this year really different from the previous 2 years is that this year we're more determined to explore the prospects of this long-term cooperation. But this idea didn't pop up in the beginning. 2 weeks, I think 2 or 3 weeks before COP17, we have already started our conversation on planning this. We started a long email chain, and we started several Skype conferences. But the more we talk to each other, the more we realize that we really need more time to get to know each other. So we think this workshop thing should be the start of our cooperation, but not the end of our conversation. And I see actually a lot of potential in the cooperation between the China youth and the US youth with regard to climate change and sustainable development. Within our own organization, China Youth Climate Action Network, there are 10 Chinese youth, all undergraduates from the colleges in the US or Canada. In our weekly meetings, we always have one youth share his or her what he or she has learned in the courses that are related to environment, and we always have heated discussions and reflective thoughts. The youth who came in didn't know anything about environment actually ended up learning a lot from those who majored in environment-related fields. And these years, I see more and more Chinese students who go study in the US, no matter as undergraduate students or as graduate students. And I see this great potential in them if we can create a platform for all of them together with all the students from the US and also the students back in China who have a real concern for the environment issues. And also, let's get back to the workshop. As the facilitator of the workshop yesterday, I would be more than glad to introduce some of the highlights from yesterday's workshop. I think there are more than 40 youth from China and US who came yesterday. And first we listened to the 3 speakers we invited, Jennifer and Mr. Zhang from Environmental Defense Fund and Yockling from Third World Network. They addressed the issue of climate change and sustainable development between China and the US, the necessity of collaboration between China and the US, and they encourage the interaction and collaboration between the youth from both countries. Then my colleague Yuan and Joseph introduced us with some projects the youth organizations from China and the US have engaged in, such as shutting down the coal-fired plants on campuses from Sierra Club, that's very successful, and the energy reduction projects on campuses from CYCAN. And the most exciting parts of the workshop came when the 40 youth divided into 3 rotating discussion groups, and we covered several topics as how can we learn from each other in cooperating and communicating better with our governments, be it local, national, or international, and how can we cooperate with each other in building capacity and educating more youth, and how can we cooperate on the long term. And a lot of sparkling ideas emerged, such as we can share more of these projects and learn from each other. In the end, we had a video station where youth from both sides reflected on the workshop and expressed their wishes for long-term cooperation. And as I said in the beginning, I think one single workshop only gave us a very limited amount of time to cover a very limited amount of scope. But we would like to make this a beginning of a longer coalition to extend our topic from climate change to sustainable development, and to extend our coalition between only 4 of our organizations to all the youth from China and US who truly concerns the environmental issues. And now I would like to turn the microphone to Yuan, who will tell us more about the cooperative opportunities between China youth and US youth.
Hello everyone, this is Yuan from China Youth Climate Action Network. So I would like to briefly introduce you guys what kind of like potential collaborative opportunities that we have during the workshop. During the workshop, we have Joseph from the US and me from China to as youth representatives to brief what the Chinese youth and the US youth have done back in their own country. We do see that from the projects that we've taken in our own country, we have many potential collaborative opportunities. For example, we both focus extensively on on-campus projects, while the US youth have raised massive campaigns among various universities to shut down the coal-fired power plants running on campuses, the Chinese youth research on the energy usage patterns and try to compile the sustainable reports for the universities and push the school board to adopt the energy saving solutions on campus. Then as we engage deeper into the discussion, we find out huge differences between the US and China. Socially, economically, and even ideologically. Actually, I was studying in the US, and it was my first time that I learned the US students from the on-campus clubs went to the local officials' offices, knock on their doors, say hello, and say, hey, could you please shut down the coal-fired power plants? It might not be the same case in China, as we have a totally different political structure. However, I see that the US and China youth have totally different approaches in influencing policy makers. However, speaking out the differences between the US and China is a first step, is a prerequisite for the mutual understanding. And I believe that the mutual understanding does provide us a solid basis for the further consensus. As we keep digging into the open discussion, those exciting convergences and great ideas did come out. It seems like that despite those huge gaps between the two countries, there exists more common ground than we had expected. A great thing come out is that as youth groups, we find that there is a lot of things that we need to learn from each other on the organizational level. For example, we want to exchange our own experience in internal governance and structure and the effective campaigns in raising effective strategies in raising the campaigns on campus, and also even we can share our fundraising strategies. We both discovered that there is a lack of understanding of the energy and climate policies in each country. And the great idea is that we could share those resources and we could share, inform, or potentially translate those policies to each country's youth. We talked about the possibilities of sharing academic materials, research efforts, and training resources related to climate change and sustainable development. Thus, we are considering to set up an online platform for our information sharing. It becomes more exciting when it comes to our potential collaborative opportunities on projects besides those information sharing. For example, we from both sides have green campus projects. Although we might have different approaches in details in making our campus more sustainable, we do share the same vision that we want to do something, very little, just beside our own hands in daily life on campus. So we discussed how we can collaborate together. For example, a great idea is to do the US-China campus matching program, where we can potentially work on the green gas inventory projects to understand more on the different patterns of energy use for two countries and potential energy saving solutions. We hope to take the same standards and methods to do the green gas inventory. Moreover, since we have a lot of US students and Chinese students studying abroad in the other country, we think it will be a great initiative to get those students connected with the other country's local environmental organization and then get them plugged in the environmental groups on campus. So here are some potential collaborative opportunities that we come out from the discussions, and then I will give the floor to Louise to talk about long-term vision on such collaboration.
Thanks, Yuan. I'm Louise. I'm the development director of SustainUS. And so these past 3 COPs made us realize the need for a longer-term plan of action for keeping this conversation going. So building off of a joint memorandum of understanding endorsed by both Jonathan Pershing, the lead U.S. negotiator, and Su Wei, the lead Chinese negotiator, last year in Cancun, we're jointly putting out a declaration of cooperation to establish the US-China Youth Coalition as a permanent forum for continuing the dialogue between our two countries. Through this coalition, we seek to foster mutual understanding, build partnerships, and share ideas, methods, and actions that influence policy and society. Our goals are four: to bring awareness to the shared challenges that our countries face with respect to climate change, to work together to alter the trend of a continuously warming climate due to the emissions of greenhouse gases, and to work together to attain sustainable development in China, the US, and globally. And lastly, to create a long-term action strategy for collaboration between US and Chinese youth. The ideas that Yuan mentioned are just the start of how we can fulfill these objectives. More fundamentally, we seek to build trust. Trust that starts on an individual level and forms the building blocks for future generations of Chinese and US leaders to work together. On global issues such as climate change and economic trade, our countries have been stuck in a gridlock of suspicion and finger-pointing. But this is not and cannot be the way forward. I'm a firm believer that the more we interact with each other, the more we realize how much we actually share. Today, there are more opportunities to connect youth from around the world with each other than ever before. As Guan Guan and Yuan mentioned, there's a lot of study abroad exchanges. In fact, last year, 14,000 United States students studied abroad in China, and 128 Chinese youth studied abroad in the United States. We've got more and better opportunities to collaborate on this global ecological crisis facing our generation. As a Chinese American, I was lucky enough to grow up learning some of the cultural and language traditions of my heritage. But it wasn't until after I graduated from university and moved to Beijing that I really started to grasp the political, social, and economic dynamics of China. I had studied some of these issues in college, but I did most of my learning through conversations with people that I met while I was there. And I often found myself answering questions from my Chinese friends about everything from American pop culture to how our government works, and likewise from my American friends back home about what it was like to live in China. And I realized more than anything, there was a lot more curiosity than distrust from the people of both countries. Despite some big differences between China and the United States, I realized that we're facing a lot of the same challenges as societies. Issues such as how to build more energy-efficient buildings, how to grow our economies while maintaining sustainable practices, and how to develop and deploy clean energy technologies. Right after I get back from Durban, I'm actually headed to Tianjin with some of my classmates at MIT, where I'm a student of urban and environmental planning. I'll be working with students from Tsinghua University, architecture students, on how to build sustainable neighborhood development. It's programs such as these that reiterate how much we have to learn from each other. And participating in dialogue with each other is the first step of building this bridge of cooperation. Actively maintaining that dialogue is equally important to ensure that we continue to move forward with concrete actions. There will inevitably be points of disagreement, but keeping those channels of communication open will allow us to share ideas and actions and educate each other and find solutions for ultimately addressing climate change and sustainable development. And understanding where both sides are coming from on these issues is critical to productive engagement. In 10 years, we're going to be the ones serving in our country's negotiating teams and in our legislative bodies and working in our environmental agencies and leading our civil society groups for a greener future. The trust and friendship that we're forming today will hopefully ensure that as our country's future leaders, we can build on the foundations of hope and cooperation. Thank you so much. And I think we have time to answer some questions if anyone in the audience has any.
Any questions from any members of the audience? Yes.
Hi, my name is MJ Shao. I'm from Green Tech Media. I was wondering, so you talked a lot about the dialogue that you're creating. Is there a particular first project or first issue that this collaboration is going to undertake?
I think building off of the discussions from our workshops, it seems like the main common area that we had interest in was actually on campus collaboration, and how to do sustainable campus development, how to talk to administration in our respective universities, sharing ideas about how we can even do inventories of energy efficiency and that sort of thing. I don't know if you guys want to add a little bit more to that.
I think personally the probably the project that could get started up fastest after that would be the trainings and sharing program that was mentioned, particularly about for capacity building within organizations, as student groups, there's constant need to develop and bring in new students because students graduate and move on into the real world. And we have different tactics in the US and China, and both of them are equally as effective, and creating trainings and methods for sharing will only strengthen our organizations, and that will probably be the second fastest program that can be developed.
So I'm thinking of, besides the on-campus projects and also the capacity building, I'm thinking that communication might be a great issue that we can work on together. Because we understand that, as just Joseph mentioned, that we find that there is a fuzzy word called trust that is lacking between the US and China, especially on the negotiation table. So we think that as youth, the first thing that we want to do is try to communicate with each other, try to understand why we made such policies based on our own country situation. For example, like for the China and the US, we see that they have huge different energy patterns, energy consumption patterns between the two countries. So this will be our understand things like that will be our first step, to cooperate in the long term.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I'm a student at Johns Hopkins University in a master's program in environmental planning. I was just wondering what brought you all here to Durban to these climate negotiations. Thank you.
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for that question. So I've been involved with SustainUS as a volunteer on their steering committee this is my third year, and I've never actually gotten to make it to a COP, but I'm really excited to be here right now. I think for me, living abroad in China really illuminated some of the global environmental problems, and to show that it's not just isolated in different parts of the world, that we're all being impacted by that in a lot of different ways regionally. And my hope here at the COP was to understand more about the impacts faced by other international youth, and to work with them through the youth constituency and through our respective organizations, and learn more about some of the challenges they're facing and some of the ways that we can work together to address that on a grassroots level.
I think the most thing, actually I was studying in the US, so I realized how different the US and China youth think. There is a huge gap just in between of the two countries. So we realized, even I was at the COP15 before, so I realized at that time the China and US, the two biggest emitters, how they kind of blocked each other in the negotiations. And I realized that this is not something just on the negotiation, this is not something just on the political level. It's actually something deep-rooted even in its own culture, in its own ideology. And I think that as youth, we should start first. We should move one step further. We should talk about why that is the case. So this is the thing that bring us together here.
I think just as something as Yuan said, maybe as youth we can only do very little to influence the negotiation part. But I think why we're here is I think there are two reasons why we're here. The first is that climate change, especially back in China, is still not a mainstream problem that people have attention on. So I think the first thing we can interpret what's going on here about the climate change negotiations and also the climate change issues. We interpret them and then we spread the words back to the youth back in China. So to raise awareness, I think that's the first step to make some change and make some changes. And I think the second point why we're here is because there are a lot of youth organizations from all the different countries that are here that we don't actually know much about. I think the first step is to interact with them, just like what we did yesterday in the workshop, in the US-China workshop, to interact with them, get to know how they function, how they work, and to learn from them, and also to tell them what the China youth are doing. I think that's the two reasons why that brought me here.
Yes, and thank you. For me, this is actually my third COP. And looking back, I do sometimes wonder why I keep coming back. But then it's interactions like this that remind me why this is so important. That as climate change is an international issue, we need an international forum to solve it. And youth need to be present there. And by coming back every year, it re-inspires me to return to the US and fight even harder on climate change policy, because I know and I get to see firsthand the amazing work that my peers around the world are doing. And again, there's nothing more inspirational and that gives me more hope than knowing that there's a global network out there, and that together it will take some time, but we can solve this issue. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Greenberg. I'm on the board of alumni for Long Island University, and our school actually has a program, and I studied in China, and there's a program to China, and I think it's a fantastic idea, and I want to bring it back to the board. So I guess my question is, how does our school and how do other schools, because I imagine there will be a lot of support, how do we link in with this initiative?
That's a really great question, and I think the first start of it is connecting with us, so that if you can have your contact information with one of us from the U.S.-China Youth Coalition for Sustainable Development, we can connect you with the groups that are on the campuses, because we know as organizations where our students are located. So I don't know what school Long Island College University has connections with, but it's very possible that there's schools that CYCAN works with, and if in that case, then we'd want to make sure that your students got in touch with the CYCAN students there. I think that's the first step. Additional questions?
Hi, MJ Shao from Green Tech Media again. I just was wondering, how do you feel like your voices are being represented right now by the official Chinese and U.S. delegations? And if not, how you plan on going forward and ensuring that they are?
I would say that's a very interesting topic. That's a very interesting question. Like actually, for the China youth, we feel that sometimes it's very easy accessible here. I mean, at the international conferences here, we can have more contact with them, and we talk with them on our positions and opinions. So we think that actually, I think just being here is even more important. I mean. We should definitely come to COP and represent as China youth, and kind of like build up the connections with the official delegation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just as Yuan said, maybe back home it will be harder for us to get in contact with our the delegations here, and I'm glad that I think we made some first steps. I think several days ago we have met with some of the delegates from the Chinese negotiators, and I think at least we get to know each other, and then yeah, I think that's the first step, and then we'll see what we can do further.
In terms of the U.S. youth and our relationship with the U.S. negotiating team, I think they've historically been quite supportive of our collaboration. The last, as I mentioned in Cancun, the last series of workshops, Jonathan Pershing actually attended one of them, and he supported the Memorandum of Understanding between the two countries written by the youth. And so I think there's been a very encouraging backing from them. But in terms of whether I think that they're currently representing what we're calling for here, I think there's a long way to go. I know there's a lot of constraints with the U.S. domestic policy that are shaping how our U.S. negotiators what they're doing here, I guess. So that's my answer.
I'd just like to second what Louise says, that the negotiating team has been very supportive of our collaboration, which has been wonderful. Of course, it is a very difficult domestic political atmosphere right now for the United States. And of course we wish that they were stronger. Of course we wish that actions were faster. And we are pushing continuously on the domestic front and on the international front for the U.S. to play more of a leadership role. And just because it's not happening at the speed that we want today doesn't mean we're not going to continue to push for that tomorrow. More questions?
Hi, my name is Laura Fernandez. I'm from Florida International University, and I just had a quick questions in regards to the initiative process that you guys had in collaborating with each other in the previous years. Did you guys envision that this was going to be so strong by this COP?
I think there was always the hope, but I think personally that this collaboration has far exceeded my initial hope in Copenhagen. That there was the possibility, that first meeting in Copenhagen, there was the flicker that it was possible, but I'm very impressed and very pleased with how it has gone. So that would be my only comment.
And I think that's a great question. Actually, that's our intention for this year. The reason that we want to build a long-term collaboration rather than just a once-off COP experience is the reason that we are sitting in this room, and we were sitting in our we are doing our workshop and to discuss our topic on the long-term collaboration opportunity.
Great, and unfortunately I'm getting the time signal from our folks in the back, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you all for coming out today, and we'll be around if there's questions that people still want us to answer. Thank you so much.